Beneath the moonlit surface of the Nile Delta, a forest of red granite colossi stands sentinel, half swallowed by silt. Divers glide past a toppled pylon, the last gate to a vanished city, where Heracleion once pulsed as Egypt's maritime heart. Their torch beams catch temple lintels carved with the names of gods, cargo stones stamped with Thonis Heracleion, and decrees in two scripts, one for Greeks, one for pharaohs. Here, where ships from Athens and Phoenicia once waited for customs, the city's docks and statues lie eerily preserved, yet missing from the world's maps. The enigma. How did Egypt's grand entry port, rival to Alexandria, vanish so utterly that for centuries even its name was a myth? Some historians point to the relentless quakes and subsidence that turned avenues to rivers, temples to mud islands, until by the 2nd century BCE, Heracleion slid beneath the tides. Yet physical disaster alone cannot explain its total erasure. As silt claimed the city, Ptolemaic rulers were building Alexandria's fame just up the coast. Trade routes, priestly rituals, even the taxes from foreign merchants, all were rerouted north. Temples closed, records moved for safekeeping, and the city's priestly archives, once the guardians of treaties and tariffs, disappeared into silence. What makes this story stranger is the paper trail. In Roman and Greek chronicles, Alexandria dominates. Heracleion is a footnote, a cautionary tale of hubris and lost gods. But underwater, bilingual decrees and receipts surface, a double record suggesting Heracleion still handled the king's business even as its memory was being buried. Was this the result of natural catastrophe alone? Or did powerful interests engineer the disappearance, rewriting who controlled Egypt's wealth and foreign policy? Fringe researchers whisper of lost archives spirited away, of secret cults whose rituals continued below sea level, even as Alexandria's bureaucrats claimed their city as Egypt's true gateway. Scholars still debate, was Heracleion erased by water, by politics, or by both? How many treaties, fortunes, and dynastic secrets slipped into oblivion with it? And beneath the silt, do the lamps of the drowned kingdom still burn in the darkness, waiting for history to remember? The Nile's green water folds over secrets lost to time. Under the moon, divers drift past colossal statues, red granite torsos with blank faces and toppled crowns, silent among silt. A fallen pylon, once a gate for pharaohs, leans at an angle that suggests collapse was sudden, not slow. These ruins are all that remain of Thonis Heracleion, a city where Egypt and the world once met. On the sea floor they find more than stone, bilingual decrees written for both native and foreign eyes, promising order and welcome. Cargo weights are stamped with dual names, proof that this was a port of two identities, two audiences, one thriving current. But maps now show only Alexandria, a newer city further west, and the story of Heracleion slips into myth. For 1,000 years, this city was the gate where caravans and ships offloaded wine, linen, grain, and ambitions. So how does a place that large, that wealthy, simply vanish from the world's memory? Mainstream history says it was a disaster of nature. The delta was always unstable. Soft earth prone to trembling. Earthquakes racked the coastline. The ground liquefied, buildings sank, and eventually entire districts gave way beneath the water. It's tempting to leave the story there. A city swallowed by accident, no more. But look closer and the disappearance becomes more than geology. By the time Thonis Heracleion was sinking, the power of Egypt was moving. New rulers crowned themselves in Alexandria just up the coast, where the land was firmer and ambitions sharper. Trade routes, customs, and even religious festivals, all were quietly rerouted to the new capital. The city's temples closed their doors. The archives, once filled with records of tariffs and treaties, went archival. a word that in Egypt could mean lost or hidden as much as preserved. Within a few generations, the city's entire official story was replaced. Roman and Ptolemaic chronicles speak almost exclusively of Alexandria's glory. Alexandria became the symbol of Egypt's cosmopolitan reach, the new center for power and trade. Thonis Heracleion fades to a footnote, the way an inconvenient predecessor is gently set aside in a family album. But underwater, divers keep finding receipts and decrees in two scripts, a double record of who owed whom and who funded what. These documents suggest that as late as the city's final years, it remained a hub for exchanges, alliances, and financial power. Some historians believe this erasure was more than just neglect. To erase a harbor is to erase memory, the contracts, the debts, the favors owed. For new rulers starting fresh in Alexandria, erasing Thonis Heracleion meant erasing old deals and the records of who paid for what. The city's memory was not just lost, but deliberately drowned. Its stones sunk, its paper trails scattered or archived beyond reach. As we move south along old monsoon lanes, legends whisper that the city's lamps still burned after the waves had closed over them, casting light for ships that no longer came. In the end, Thonis Heracleion stands as a lesson. When a port disappears, the world can forget not just a place, but the people and promises that once flowed through its gates. The waters off Gujarat shift with the tides of memory and rumor. Before sunrise, fishermen glide over the gulf, their lamps flickering on black waves. Deep below, modern sonar draws a ghostly map, a honeycomb of stone foundations, silent and symmetrical, cut into the seafloor. The pattern mirrors the grids above, as if some ancient city lingers in the deep, refusing to be erased. Down there in the silt and broken shells, the dredge nets bring up more than fish. Stone anchors, worn but recognizable, shaped to hold ships in currents that have long since changed course. Circular bases, some as wide as a well's mouth, hint at columns that once stood upright, marking harbors or sanctuaries for travelers lost in fog. Scattered among the debris are shards inscribed with symbols no local script can fully explain. Fragments dredged and catalogued, then quietly boxed away. Official histories once wrote these off as leftovers from late medieval ports, no more ancient than the jetties that dotted India's coastline in more recent centuries. But the sea doesn't always obey easy timelines. Every monsoon, new layers of sand slide over the old. Storm surges unbury and rebury what lies beneath. River mouths shift, deltas migrate, harbors are rebuilt and abandoned in cycles that stretch across dynasties. One city rises as another falls until the traces of centuries bleed into each other. The seabed a palimpsest that refuses simple translation. Still, stories have a way of surfacing. Local legend says this sunken city was once the capital of Krishna, a metropolis built in a single night and drowned in vengeance. Colonial-era surveyors, skeptical of epics, dismissed these claims as myth. When they stumbled on stone rows beneath the waves, they penciled them in as natural alignments. Convenient explanations that kept the old geography and its troubling questions safely at arm's length. Yet as decades passed and more artifacts emerged, anchors too massive for medieval craft, pottery older than the earliest maps, the doubts began to grow. If this list of sunken cities is as old as the stories claim, the entire chronology of peninsular trade would lurch backward, forcing historians to redraw the lines of influence and commerce. The order of things long accepted would be upended by the evidence resting just out of sight in the mud. And so the fate of Dwarka, city of sea lamps, city of submerged stones, remains unresolved. Was it merely another port in a line of forgotten harbors? Or does it mark the overlap between epic and archaeology, between the stories we inherit and the facts we can touch? The debate continues as divers search for answers and fishermen cast their lamps into the uncertain dark. Westward, where the Aegean laps quietly against the Peloponnese, the story shifts to another ghost. Here, in just 10 feet of surf, a sunbeam traces the outline of rooftops that have lain hidden for over 3,000 years. This is Pavlopetri, a name the modern world only recently remembered. When the water is still, you can make out paved lanes and the shapes of houses, courtyards open to the sky, as if the people simply stepped away and left everything behind. Beneath the surface, loom weights and jars are pinned in layers of sediment, testifying to daily life interrupted but not erased. The site's urban planning is unmistakable: straight roads, right angles, careful division of public and private space. Yet Pavlopetri predates the city codes of classical Greece by centuries. Who were these planners and where did they learn their craft? The answer is not in any familiar record. A slow process of land sinking, perhaps hastened by a violent quake, left the city underwater but remarkably preserved. Over time, rumor replaced memory and the town's name disappeared from oral tradition. When early 20th century surveyors first charted the area, they listed the blocks as Rocky Shoal, a bureaucratic error that kept Pavlopetri off official maps and starved it of the funds that might have brought its story to light sooner. The implications are profound. To push organized urban life this far back in time is to redraw the map of migration, invention, and exchange. It means that entire chapters of technological advancement were written and lost long before history's accepted starting lines. Pavlopetri stands as a reminder that the tides can erase almost anything except the questions that come after. From Gujarat to Greece, from sea lamps to sunken lanes, the world's shoreline grows older with every scan, every artifact pulled from the sand. Each discovery asks us to look again at the stories we accept and the stories we bury. And still, beneath the waves, the lamps of lost cities keep burning, casting their faint light through the silt of centuries. Off the coast of Israel, in water barely deeper than a story, a forgotten ring of stone rises from the silt. Atlit-Yam, they call it. A Neolithic village, now a cold blue grave. Divers drift among eel grass, weaving through a circle of megaliths that stand sentinel around a freshwater spring. From above, the formation looks like the eye of a world that watched millennia slip by, unblinking. Around it, mud covers the outlines of ancient huts, each one half swallowed by sand, eelgrass moving gently across their roofs as if to shield the memory of a vanished community. Artifacts from the village have surfaced in fits and starts. Wells sunk deep to reach the only drinkable water. Sickle blades napped from flint, still sharp enough to cut. And skeletons, many of them strangely marked by a single affliction: chronic ear infections. The pattern is clear only to those who look twice. These people lived as farmers and fishers, yes, but also as relentless divers, plunging again and again into the brine, trading the comfort of land for whatever bounty the sea could offer. It cost them. Some never surfaced again. The real puzzle, though, is not just how they lived, but why they built a stone ring around a spring that, even in their day, must have seemed vulnerable to the sea. Was it a boundary, a claim, a wish to protect something essential as the coastline slipped away? Or was it a ritual circle intended to keep the water pure in a world where salt advanced year after year? Mainstream histories rarely mention such ancient villages. They focus instead on the ports that followed, skipping the humble commons that for centuries made the coast possible. But the land here changed with a violence that outpaced any scribe. At the end of the last ice age, post-glacial melt pushed the sea forward inch by inch, year by year, until one day the ocean did not stop. The coastal plain vanished. A tsunami, sudden and absolute, sealed the fate of Atlit-Yam beneath a blanket of sand and debris. The cover-up was geological, not political, a loss so total it left only stone to remember by. Yet the consequences still echo. To find organized wells and a managed water source in a Neolithic fishing village is to rewrite the division between sacred and practical. The circle at Atlit-Yam proves that water, not worship, was the heart of survival. That early engineering began not with temples but with the stubborn will to keep the sea at bay. If we honor only the later cities and their monuments, we erase the true beginning. Communities whose daily battles with nature shaped all that followed. Travel east, past modern harbors and oil rigs, and the mystery deepens. This time, at the edge of Japan's southern islands. In the swirling blue off Yonaguni, divers find themselves descending not on a shipwreck or settlement, but a staircase cut from the rock, as sharp as any monument above ground. Sunlight flickers down ledges and right-angled terraces, parrotfish darting through what looks for all the world like a plaza designed for giants. The walls rise and fall in straight lines, edges almost too perfect, too regular, to have come from mere chance. Artifacts here are ambiguous, rectilinear rooms, striations in the stone that some claim show tool work, and mysterious offshore alignments that march into the deep. The debate is endless. Is Yonaguni's terrace a relic of an ancient lost city, proof that human hands sculpted the seabed before written history? Or is it a masterpiece of nature, a sandstone plateau jointed and shattered by earthquake and current, later enhanced by a people looking to quarry what the sea revealed? Tourism boards in Okinawa push the legend, advertising Yonaguni as a sunken temple. Dive guides show visitors the main street, the grand staircase, the altar, each label more enticing than the last. But among academic circles, opinions split hard. Some dismiss the site as erosion and wishful thinking, a playground for the imagination. Others see traces of deliberate intervention but keep their field notes unpublished, wary of ridicule or funding cuts. The official story stays muddled, half-spoken, shelved. If Yonaguni's ledges were truly worked by hand, the implications would be seismic. Maritime construction in the region would predate not just written history, but all established models of East Asian engineering. If the site is natural, it's a lesson in the mind's hunger for patterns, the way human longing can turn random fractures into forgotten stairways to nowhere. As the tide shifts, attention drifts back to the Nile, to another city sleeping beneath the mud. These submerged mysteries, whether proven, debunked, or left unresolved, remind us of a truth that outlasts any monument. What vanishes beneath the waves is never just stone, but the memory of how we learn to shape land and water, and the silent cost of forgetting what lies below. Along Egypt's northern rim, where the Nile hesitates before mingling with the sea, night falls with a hush. Oil lanterns flicker atop marshy docks, their reflections quivering beside the battered remains of a lion-headed statue. Once, this canal marked the entrance to Canopus, a city famed not just for its opulence but for something subtler, the promise of healing, the rumor of miracle in every ripple of its waters. Buried now beneath centuries of silt, Canopus lingers as a whisper. Its grand avenue, lined with mosaic, slips quietly beneath the mud, ending at a serapeum swallowed whole by the delta's shifting ground. Archaeologists surface festival stelae by the handful, flat stones carved with dates and lists, each commemorating rituals performed on shores that no longer exist. Priestly inventories record the gifts left by anxious pilgrims, votive cups, oil lamps, tokens shaped like limbs or eyes, all seeking relief from illness or loss. Clay pipes and coins stamped with symbols of water and lion, a city that built its fortune not just on trade, but on something harder to quantify. Faith in the curative powers of its springs, the secret commerce of hope. Yet even as Canopus flourished, its fate was sealed by forces both natural and political. The Nile's branching fingers, once the city's lifeblood, began to retreat. Silt choked the harbor, canals failed, cutting off fresh water and trade. And while the physical city decayed, something stranger happened to its soul. Its most lucrative rituals, the processions, the rites by moonlight, the healing baths, were quietly franchised elsewhere. Newer, safer towns downriver began to claim the same miracles. Shrine by shrine, Canopus's unique ceremonies migrated, their ledgers vanishing into the archives of rival cult centers. Official histories credited these upstarts with feats once reserved for the city beneath the silt. The cover-up was almost elegant. Records of Canopus fade from papyrus just as other cities begin touting miraculous waters and proven cures. The ledgers, which once listed donors and pilgrimage numbers, go missing. Only a handful of notes in Roman letters betray the trick. By imperial decree, the inventories of Canopus are to be relocated and preserved for posterity. Posterity, it turned out, would have to do without. The real stake was never just civic pride, but control. Whoever owned the rights owned the donors, the flow of pilgrims, and quietly the leverage to shape policy. Canopus lost its healing spring and with it its power. As if in mockery, the old Heracleion still lies beneath the mud, its foundation stones mapped by sonar, its corridors rumored to hold caches of votives and accounts that never made it into the new city's archives. And in the half-light above, fishermen's lamps still flicker on the canal, haunted by a memory of power, a market in hope, now drowned. North and west across the sea, the shoreline curls into Italy's Bay of Naples, where a different kind of lost city lies in wait. Underwater marble floors checker the seafloor, their colored stones rippling as volcanic heat rises from cracks below. Mosaics swirl with ancient scenes, masks, dancers, feasts, glimpsed only in the flicker of passing fish. This is Baiae, the sunken playground of the Caesars. In its day, Baiae was more than a resort. It was a network of private villas, pleasure palaces built atop steaming springs, their walls insulated by art and intrigue. Beneath the surface, divers uncover luxury, sprawling houses linked by secret causeways, fish ponds once stocked for the banquets of emperors, wine cellars still marked by graffiti in the hand of a senator's slave. Some villas even had underground tunnels, escape routes for when the politics of Rome washed ashore. But for all its glamour, Baiae's real power lay in its privacy. Here, far from the formalities of the capital, deals were struck and dissolved, alliances made, betrayals orchestrated. A senator could host an emperor, a general could gamble away his fortune, and every transaction would dissolve into the steam. When the shoreline began to drop, slowly at first, then with volcanic violence, Baiae started to vanish. Bradycism, the restless up-and-down motion of the earth, caused parts of the city to sink. As the waters rose, luxury went underwater, and with it the paper trails, deeds to villas, lists of gifts, records of who owned what and who paid whom to keep silent. Senatorial historians writing long after moralized Baiae as a den of decadence, a cautionary tale for Rome's decline. But beneath the sermons there's a more strategic silence. As real estate vanished, so did the evidence. Confiscations hidden by water, names quietly erased from the ledgers. Sink the venue, drown the scandal. In this way, Baiae became a blank in the imperial ledger, a place to lose secrets, to erase the stains of inconvenient power. Still, fragments persist. Divers retrieve rings, statues, and coins from the silt, but the real story is what's missing. The records of who built these pleasure palaces, who lost them, and who emerged unscathed as the sea claimed the land. In the end, Baiae's submersion is less a disaster than a masterstroke, one last cover-up executed by geology and greed. Traveling farther north, history stares into a grayer sea, where fog drifts over rolling waves and the echoes of vanished land persist. This is Doggerland, the country the North Sea ate, a land bridge that once connected Britain to mainland Europe and now exists only as rumor and seabed. Modern trawlers dragging for cod and plaice occasionally haul up something stranger. A flint blade, a polished antler, a spearhead shaped for hunting not fish but reindeer. Peat blocks tumble into the hold riddled with the roots of plants that haven't grown above water in 8,000 years. The evidence is scattered but persistent. Oil surveys have mapped ancient riverbeds now miles offshore, their winding paths shadowed by gravel banks and silted lakes. From these submerged soils, scientists have pulled DNA, traces of elk, wild boar, and even people, suggesting not just passing hunters but families, villages, possibly shrines. For centuries, Doggerland was a corridor, part continent, part archipelago, where herds migrated and communities followed, their paths now invisible beneath busy shipping lanes. How did a land this vast, this populous, simply disappear from memory? Meltwater pulses from the end of the last ice age flooded the plain. Storm surges gnawed at the coast. Some settlements may have lasted for centuries, their hearths glowing under a sky already dimming with rain. But the final blow came fast. A tsunami triggered by an underwater landslide swept away the last survivors. After that, Doggerland faded not just from geography but from mind. Here, the cover-up is corporate, not imperial. Commercial seismic data collected by oil and gas companies held the map to ancient Doggerland for decades, but these records remained sealed, protected by non-disclosure agreements, locked away for private profit. Archaeologists had to plead for scraps, piecing together the vanished country from dredged-up bones and whispers in geological surveys. The stakes are enormous. If Doggerland was more than a wilderness, if it was a network of seasonal routes, gathering sites, even settlements, then the story of Mesolithic Europe is incomplete. It's not just a lost nation, but a lost network, a vanished bridge across which ideas, genes, and technologies flowed. Today, as the North Sea churns, the trawlers keep fishing up fragments of this erased world, each one a reminder that beneath every mapped coast is another, hidden by water and by will. Where the Peloponnese curves toward the Ionian, the waves come hard and fast, breaking over stones older than history's memory. In the shallows near Elise, broad columns stand like ghost reeds, bases exposed, their capitals scattered by the tide. At low water, necks of amphorae protrude through the sand, each one a silent witness to a vanished harbor. This was Phaia, the forgotten port of the Olympic coast. In its prime, Phaia was more than a gateway. It was the lifeline for athletes, officials, and merchants converging on Olympia for the famous games. Ships unloaded casks of oil, jars of olives, bolts of linen, and the horses that thundered down the stadium tracks. Harbor warehouses bulged with goods stamped from 100 ports, while coins minted in Elis passed hand to hand, proof that Phaia was as much a market as a myth. Colonnades lined the waterfront, their shadows cast long and deliberate over the sand, a city designed for spectacle and supply. But then, the tremors came. One autumn day, the earth shuddered and the sea answered. A wall of water roared in from the deep toppling columns and flooding warehouses. Amphorae rolled like dice across the harbor floor. Some accounts speak of a tsunami, others merely note the suddenness with which Phaia slipped beneath silt and salt. What followed was not just destruction, but a realignment of power. With the port gone, caravans shifted inland. The roads to Olympia grew busier, trade consolidated in safer towns. The logistical chains of the Olympic Games, the very arteries of sport and spectacle, were quietly rerouted. Here the cover-up begins. Later city annals from Elis and Olympia mention the port's demise in passing, if at all. Rival ports once dependent on Phaea's reach begin to take credit for feats they never managed, timely deliveries, patronage of victors, the sudden abundance of supplies at the games. In official histories, Phaea shrinks to a footnote, a casualty of fate. The reality is more calculated. Erase the port and you erase the record of who controlled the supply lines, who profited from victory, and who could withhold support when the games themselves were up for grabs. The stakes are clear. By minimizing Phaea's role, the keepers of the new routes controlled not just trade but the very narrative of the games. Coins of Elis, once ubiquitous here, are now prized by collectors, proof of a vanished system. Today, what remains of Phaea lies beneath shifting dunes and the restless surf, its story washed clean by 1,000 tides. Every storm brings up another shard, another clue that somewhere a chapter of Olympic history has been intentionally lost. Further east, the Black Sea sloshes against ruined stones. In the swells near the Taman Peninsula, column drums and shattered statues lie scattered under a blanket of shells. This is Phanagoria, the half-drowned agora of the Bosporan kingdom, a city divided between what the tide reveals and what it keeps. Phanagoria's story is etched in bronze decrees, burnt ship timbers, and collapsed quays. Royal proclamations once nailed to porticos now rust quietly in the silt, their words softened but not erased. The city was a crossroads of commerce, a meeting place for Greeks, Scythians, and later Roman officials. The agora buzzed with traders haggling over amber, grain, and honey, while the harbors echoed with the hammer of shipwrights. But power, as ever, drew fire. Repeated sackings left parts of the city charred and broken. When the shoreline retreated, bit by bit, then all at once, entire districts became intertidal, flooded at every high tide. Some neighborhoods were abandoned, others rebuilt on higher ground, their mosaics transplanted stone by stone. A catastrophe of fire and flood, some blamed on enemies, some on nature, provided the perfect screen for moving the capital's center offshore. Half the old city sank, half survived. The records tell two tales. Imperial biographies compress disasters into a single paragraph, mentioning only storms or hostile forces. Merchant archives, the ledgers that once tracked every crate and coin, cite unfavorable weather, an explanation as tidy as it is incomplete. In the end, half a city underwater means half its archive editable. Accounts could be rewritten, debts quietly forgiven, and inconvenient truths left to drown with the bricks. Phanagoria's sunken quarter is more than a loss. It is a blank check for historians and heirs. Today, divers haul up amphorae, tools, even wax tablets sealed with forgotten names. Each artifact is a reminder that, in the contest between nature and politics, it is memory itself that is most fragile. The city that split itself between land and tide also split its past, making the historian's work an endless low tide of discovery and omission. Now the current swings south again, back to the shores of Egypt, Alexandria's harbor, where glassy water hides another court, another erasure. Beneath the blue, divers' lights rake over fallen capitals. A sphinx's face emerges from the gloom, its features dulled by centuries of silt. This is Anti-Rhodos, Cleopatra's island, where the last queen of Egypt staged the final acts of a dynasty now remembered more for drama than detail. Anti-Rhodos was a seat of spectacle. Palace fragments sprawl across the seabed. Mosaic floors, collapsed columns, a drowned causeway that once linked the island to the royal quarter. Here, politics was theater, and theater was politics. Coins from this period show Cleopatra's profile, deliberate and defiant. Beneath the causeway, jars of silver hint at deals struck and alliances sealed. The island was more than a residence. It was a boardroom and a vault. But after the civil wars, when Egypt fell to Rome, The bay was redrawn. Earthquakes and subsidence tilted the island. New harbor works redirected the currents, erasing Antirodos from sight and from maps. The city above celebrated Augustus's triumph, while below the receipts of a court, ledgers, payrolls, lists of foreign gifts sank into the mud. In official poetry, Cleopatra's end became a moral tale, a footnote to empire. In Alexandrian municipal records, the island's ledgers thin out, their entries dissolving with the queen's fortune. Here, too, the cover-up is precise. To sink a court is to sink its receipts, to rewrite who funded whose throne. With the island gone, claims to patronage, inheritance, and even legitimacy could be recast for a new regime. The silt that buried Cleopatra's palace also buried the evidence of deals made with Rome, with merchant houses, with anyone whose allegiance might complicate the imperial story. Today, Antirodos remains a puzzle under glass water. Palace walls mapped by Atlit-Yam sonar, coins still glinting on the bottom, yet no official narrative linking them to the last days of Egypt's independence. Each discovery is a fragment, a message sent forward in time, that to control a story you do not need to burn the records. Sometimes you only need to drown them. In the lucid blue of the western Atlantic, sunlight fans down on squared stone blocks, each one as precise as a book on a forgotten shelf. Off the coast of Bimini, where Caribbean waters run so clear they could be glass, stingrays glide between seams of rock too straight, too uniform for simple chance. Here, a run of limestone slabs, regular, jointed, almost architectural, forms the legend of the Bimini Road. Some call it a megalithic ruin, a monument left by a lost age. Others see nothing but beach rock fractured by tides, the product of geology, not memory. Yet the features persist. Angles offshore, outlier stones tracing a grid, and gaps that seem designed for the hull of something ancient or the mind of someone deliberate. Local divers, fishermen, and dreamers walk the line between the two, tracing a riddle that refuses to give up its truth. Scientists weigh in with surveys and laboratory samples. One year, the Bimini Road is declared an accident, a prehistoric fish trap or natural breakwater calcified by ages of waves. Another, it's hailed as the last remnant of an Atlantic port, proof that someone crossed oceans before the first empires inked their names. Radiocarbon dates swing from the late Ice Age to the age of Spanish galleons. Survey data is alternately hyped and withheld. Archives cite lost samples and missing test results. The result? The more the site is probed, the more the answers dissolve. The stakes stretch far beyond this coral-circled run. If the Bimini Road is a relic of pre-Columbian seafaring, it remaps not just the Bahamas, but the entire Atlantic world. Trade grids ripple out from its stones. If the stones are only beach rock, then every myth from Plato's Atlantis to islander oral histories can be dismissed. Another casualty to skeptical geology. Either way, every debate, every lost core sample, every map drawn and redrawn in the sand is a vote on the story the Atlantic is allowed to tell. Follow the wakes northward, where the purple stain of murex dye and the scent of cedar hulls cut across the ancient sea. There a new shadow moves, cast not by stone but by parchment, clay, and bronze. The Mediterranean was once a web of roots, each line a channel of silk, wine, and rumor. At its heart sailed the Phoenicians, mariners and merchants whose fleets ferried not just goods but knowledge year after year, port after port. Now and then a wreck is found, the ribs of a cargo ship exposed by the current hold still packed with amphorae, and beneath them stranger cargo, a lead scroll case nestled among ballast stones, wax tablets marked in a flowing hand, lead tags stamped with strange account codes. What were these records? Simple inventories or something deeper? Portable archives, whole libraries at sea? Some scholars believe the answer lies in the gaps. On land, the Phoenicians left precious few written chronicles. Their scripts and ledgers were perishable. Their palaces of cedar and cloth quickly lost to fire and weather. Yet a pattern emerges. Duplicate records, correspondence, cargo lists, meticulously kept and then carried away, never surrendered to any one city or tax collector. The reason was survival. Government saw only what the Phoenician merchants wanted seen. Customs tallies, tribute paid, a portion of the real story. The rest, the letters and codes and records of deals made out of sight, lived and died at sea. When rivals seized a ship, its ledgers might be confiscated, read, published in the name of transparency. Or, more often, the intelligence was buried, forgotten, rewritten as another state's glory. This was no accident. If books sailed with every cargo, then history itself was always at risk of editing, sometimes by storm, sometimes by politics. Each confiscation was a silent redaction. Each ship lost was a lost chapter. The Phoenicians understood to control the ledger was to control the narrative, and the sea was both their library and their lockbox. Picture a lamplit room in Venice, Lisbon, or Seville. A cartographer bends over vellum, his knife scraping away a coastline, his ink erasing a shoal-ringed name. All across the early modern world, maps were not merely records but weapons, tools of empire, trade, and secrecy. The archive of Portolan charts, some palimpsest, some deliberate forgeries, tells a story of erasure as old as navigation itself. How many capes vanished to favor a rival capital? How many harbors were edited from the map to protect a tax monopoly or preserve a ruler's secret? The evidence lies in the margins. State-ordered corrections, monopolies on pilot books, place names forcibly retired. Dangerous islands are inked over, new ports promoted, old competitors removed not by storm but by decree. The stakes are profound. To erase a name is to erase a lineage. Whole communities, whole trade routes are recast as origin myths. The map becomes a script, one that shapes the story of who discovered, who traded, who ruled, and who never existed at all. Old maps in archives, their harbors filled in or coastlines smoothed, carry the scars of these edits. Each erasure is a silent coup, a rewriting of commerce and power that persists long after ships have sunk and cities have slipped beneath the sea. Across oceans and eras, a pattern emerges. 10 drowned worlds, 4 recurring mechanisms, subsidence, seizure, rerouting, redaction. Repeat and overlap like tide and undertow. Stone cities vanish, archives are sunk or burned, and maps are smoothed of inconvenient truths. It is not only natural disaster but human design that deletes whole civilizations and rewrites the logbook of memory. If ancient technology, forbidden truth, and history's greatest secrets can slumber beneath 20 feet of water and a single inch of ink, how many of our timelines still hinge on ledgers lost to the deep? How many rulers rise and fall in the space between edited maps and erased scripts? How many empires claim their place atop cities whose names have been rubbed out, their stories waiting to be read only by those who know where to look? The Atlantic hides its roads, the Mediterranean its memory ships, and the world's libraries of sand, silt, and stone await the next tide, the next diver, the next mapmaker brave enough to question what has been allowed to survive. In the end, the only constant is that the past is not what happened, but what someone decided should be remembered. And sometimes the greatest revelations are those that still sleep, one layer below the wake,